Hello, and welcome everyone to the first raid guide that we have for Dawntrail. We'll be covering every Extreme, Savage, and Ultimate, as well as Criterion dungeon throughout this expansion, so stay tuned for those. Today we're going to be talking about Worqor Lar Dor. I hope I pronounced that right, but let's get right into it. This is the first Extreme of Dawntrail, and it's a fun one. Before we begin, it is imperative that we go ahead and set up some light parties, 4 people in each, 2 DPS, a tank, and a healer, as well as pairs. Ideally, you have a melee DPS with a tank on both sides, as well as a ranged DPS with a healer, and of course you can arrange your DPS however you'd like, but all in all, you need to have a total of 4 pairs with a DPS and a support in each pair. Valigarmanda is the boss name and who we'll be fighting today, although I'm going to be calling him Valigar for this video. He's going to start things off with an ability called Spikesicle. You're going to want to watch both of the northern corners. A curvature type AoE is going to appear in one corner, and it's going to switch sides a total of 2 times. What I do is whatever side that it begins in is where I go to camp. So if it starts northwest, I go to northwest. Our objective here is to watch the incoming AoEs from the other corner, and as soon as we see that AoE snapshot in front of us, we step into it. We want to make our way on the curvature of the hitbox, but not going too quickly, as the third set of AoEs is going to soon spawn in front of us, and we don't want to run into it. So every pull, this is quite repetitive. You'll just go to the corner that it starts in, wait, you'll see the incoming AoEs, step into it, and then run along that hitbox. And at the same time, we are going to be met with circle AoEs. These are massive ice blocks on the corners of the arena that are essentially going to detonate whenever those AoEs reach them. If you follow this strategy where you kind of run along the curvature of the hitbox and camp around that arrow at the middle of his hitbox there, you'll find that every single safe spot for the circles will be really close, and you just have to bob and weave between a few AoEs. This is a very consistent mechanic as long as you do this movement, and I'll have a few clips running of how I do it. Skyruin is an attack that happens several times throughout this fight. It's going to apply damage, a damage over time, but more importantly, Skyruin is what determines which phase that you're in. There's a total of 3 phases or elements, and this first Skyruin is always going to be the fire phase. The first thing he's going to use is Triscourge. Triscourge is another recurring attack throughout this entire fight. All it does is apply some damage, as well as give you some debuffs. This is a fight where, as you get these debuffs, you don't want to overthink them or worry about any precise timing, as a lot of these debuffs will appear above your head when it's time to resolve them. So honestly, just ignore the debuffs for now, and I'll help you resolve them as we get closer to their resolution. A volcano on the west or east side of the arena is going to begin erupting. Run to the other side. As this happens, small circle AoEs will appear underneath every player. It is random when you get an AoE under you, but every player will get at least one AoE spawning under you. So don't stand in those, and our first iteration of the pair mechanics is quickly coming up. So what we liked to do was have Group 1 kind of own the west side of the arena, whereas Group 2 would own the east side of the arena. So if the volcano erupts on east, that Group 2 is going to need to run back over there when the volcano is done. With your pairs on both sides of the arena, Valigar will then begin preparing an attack that does not have a cast bar. It's actually based on his animations. If you see him swirling in a circle, it is going to be a donut AoE or a dynamo in the middle of the arena. If he kind of leans back and braces himself, that is going to be a massive cone AoE that shoots out from his side of the arena. And thirdly, if he imposes over the arena and looms over it, that is going to be a big chariot AoE where you have to get out of his hitbox. No matter which pattern you get, there are 3. During this fire phase, this is where the pairs come up. So you have your melees up tucked against the boss, and then your caster and healer will be tucked in the back for the pair soak damage. It's worth mentioning these dragon attacks that don't have a cast bar, I'm going to call them dragon attacks, they recur throughout the whole fight, and there is usually some kind of twist or something with them at the same time. So you'll eventually learn all three of these patterns, and they will be coming back later. As soon as your pair mechanic is resolved, either your DPS or your supports are going to have one of those debuffs we talked about. They're going to start resolving now. 4 people are just going to get a motion debuff. So if you see the ice above your head, stay moving and you will not be affected by it. It's worth mentioning though that it's not quite a snapshot, it persists. So once you see it on your head, keep moving a little bit extra and make sure it goes away before you go back to moving, or before you go back to not moving. Mountain Fire is the primary tank mechanic of the fight. A tower will spawn on the north side of the arena, and Valigar will begin bracing a massive fire attack. When you have a single tank inside of the tower, the rest of the party is going to need to LOS, or line of sight themselves, between Valigar and the tower, as there will only be a small sliver, I want to guess no more than 45 degrees, left of safe space once he hits that tower with a breath attack. At the same time, your tanks are ideally going to want to be switching out, taking turns who's tanking in this tower, because he's going to hit a lot of times in a row. And in addition to this, he is going to be sliding around on the north side of the arena, changing the angle in which you need to LOS him. He can either move all the way across the arena or just recenter himself. It's quite punishing if you're not a tank. You're probably getting one-shot by this. So my advice is to stay as close to the tower as possible, as you can change the angle of your character relative to the tower much quicker the closer you are to the tower. If you're far away, you're going to have to sprint and you're probably not making it. Quick little tidbit about this tower mechanic. This might help some of you. It helped me a lot. If you keep getting clipped by the AoE, I tried to keep the vertical part of the tower aligned with his neck, and that pretty much made me squarely in the middle of the safe spot, and I stopped dying completely as soon as I started doing that. So for this next mechanic, some more of our debuffs are going to begin resolving. This time it's light party stacks. It's a debuff that spawns on both healers back when we got our debuff soup. To resolve this, we have our light parties sit next to each other. It's worth mentioning you're going to get hit 3 times here, and each time you get hit, it's going to leave an AoE on the floor that persists. If you stay there too long, you're going to get a really, really nasty dot. You're probably dead unless you're a tank or if your healer has a crush on you or something. To resolve this, we take the initial blast. Both light parties should move adjacent to that first set. Then we step forward, and then on the final blast, we step back in and regroup on north. So melees can hit the boss, and we're now close to each other, being able to heal both light parties at once. Once those motions are done, your healers are going to get a bit of a break as another volcanic eruption occurs, so we move to the west or east side of the arena. Same as before, watch your feet, and we have another pair mechanic, followed by another dragon attack, just like before. So this could be an in, this could be an out, this could be a cone. But there will be a pair mechanic in addition to this, as before. The only twist this time is there's actually going to be a spread AoE on every player afterward, and this is the final debuff from all of our earlier debuffs that we got. So same as before, resolve the pairs, resolve the dragon attack, and then spread out for damage. Is going to use Disaster Zone. It's pretty hard hitting raid wide that basically ends an elemental phase and goes back to normal. Ruin Foretold will come quickly after that, which does even more raid-wide damage and begins the adds phase of this fight. So our light parties are going to split up again. Group 1 left, Group 2 right. There's going to be 3 spears. Group 1 is going to work on the left spear. Group 2 is going to work on the right spear. Don't kill the middle spear first. That can cause some uptime problems later. If you want to know why, just ask me in the comments or something. But at the same time, there are going to be conal AoEs jutting out from Valigar that are going to be, as soon as they snapshot, they'll then move and hit the previous safe spots. These aren't too bad. You just want to keep sidestepping with your light party because at the same time, we are getting hit by stack AoEs. Now, these are considered a wild charge, which means that the player in front is going to be receiving tank buster level damage. So make sure your tanks are in front or you're going to start seeing people get one shot. Pretty heavy damage phase here. So just make sure you're damaging those spears on the edge and then slowly consolidating your way back into the center, and then both light parties can work on that middle spear. If you're wondering about uptime efficiency, you cannot hit the boss during this, so killing the spears as fast as possible is the way to go. Also figured I should mention, if you're too slow, there is a bar called Ruinous Power that is charging up as you're doing this. So if you're too slow, he's just going to hard enrage and one-shot you. If you're relatively slow and succeed, we didn't notice any crazy difference in damage. So if he's at like 90% charge, we maybe just mitigated it really well, but I didn't see a noticeable like ramp up in damage if it's close to failing. So I'm going to go ahead and just say it's pretty much pass fail. You either do it or you don't. Once the spears are done, the boss will become targetable again, and he'll begin casting a very long cast bar called Tulidisaster. You want to make sure you snapshot your mitigations pretty late on this, as honestly, it's just a super long-winded raid wide. It hits a couple times. It's like a budget harrowing hell. You still want to mitigate it pretty well, as there's several hits, but all in all, this is a good time to recover, get some damage out, and get ready for the next mechanic. Okay, so this is where the fight switches into like a branching path, as Valigar is going to use Skyruin again, which, if you recall, Skyruin is what brought him into the fire phase earlier. We have two options here. He can either bring us into the lightning form, or he brings us into the blizzards form. So feel free to use the timestamps down below if you're curious about a particular phase. We're going to be talking about the lightning phase first. And let's go ahead and get into that. You'll know it's the lightning phase because when he's casting Skyruin, you'll see particle effects that look like lightning everywhere. Just like the previous Skyruin, this one is going to apply a damage over time to us. And you're going to notice that the arena is going to change. For now, we're going to ignore the little platforms. We're going to get more debuffs when he hits us with another Triscourge. Just like before, ignore the debuffs. We'll resolve them as we go. The first one we're going to deal with is actually another light party stack. So we have group 1 left, group 2 right. This time when we resolve the fire stack, it's only going to hit you once and there is no persisting AoE. That's because we're not in the fire phase anymore. So it's just a one and done hit, heal it up, and then get ready for Hail of Feathers. Hail of Feathers is going to spawn sequential proximity AoEs that will either begin on the west side of the arena or the east side. They will spawn, they'll follow one another, a whole bunch of them are going to spawn in a row, and you're going to want to basically run in a big circle and start opposite of where it began. The very first AoE that's going to spawn is going to give us a feather that we can attack. Technically they all spawn feathers, but the one you're going to want to attack and target is the very first one that spawns. It's imperative that we kill at least one of the feathers, but in general, for like PF standard and stuff, I'm guessing people are just going to kill the first one. So dodge the AoEs with proximity, and then as you work your way around, you're eventually going to reach that first feather. It's worth mentioning, though, that once you get to that feather, you're going to have to keep moving a little bit for proximity. So ranged DPS players, as well as our healer friends, are going to kind of hard carry this mechanic. Melees will probably have to move away from the feather before it's dead, depending on how much your group is pumping. But make sure that feather dies, and that's going to be our new safe spot as soon as those proximity AoEs are gone. Blighted Bolt is the cast bar that Valigar will use, and all that's going to do is make the feathers explode. But since we killed one, we have a safe spot over here. Once that's all done, this is where our debuffs come into play, and the little platforms on the floor come into play. The platforms on the floor that are a green hue is going to raise your character, and they're going to float. We're going to send any players with ice to these platforms. They don't have to do a motion mechanic, they just have to make sure that they are lifted. Another very important thing here is that you don't want to clump up your ice players, because if they're too close, it actually fails the mechanic. So treat it like a spread, even though it's not doing damage. The lightning players, there will be 4 of them, are going to have to make sure they stay on the ground. They cannot be in a green platform. And they're going to have a circle AoE on them. So you send your ice players into the gravity squares, you send your lightning players into the not gravity squares, and you let it resolve. Once the lightning and ice markers resolve, the boss will then do another one of his dragon attacks, except this time we're going to have baited circular AoEs under every player as the initial attack snapshots. So if it's in, make sure that as soon as you are in, you run out. If it is a chariot, make sure you run into the boss after it snapshots. And if it is cone on the sides, you want to make sure that you leave that little area that you were hiding in, because a whole bunch of circles are going to spawn and you don't want to be there. Thunderous Breath is an attack that hits the entire arena, unless you are standing on a gravity platform. The only catch is, on the side of the arena, you'll notice that there are some portal-like AoEs that are going to shoot beams through the arena. To resolve this, you want to first find the row or the safe lane that does not have an AoE going through it, but you're going to want to make sure that you are in the gravity squares. My group made the mistake of not realizing that we needed to be on a gravity square, and we'll show a clip of what happens when you're not lifted. So make sure you're actually in the gravity square, or you're going to get hit by the breath, but other than that, this one is not too bad. Once the Thunderous Breath resolves, more debuffs are going to appear, and all it is the opposite of before. The people that had ice are going to have lightning, and the people that had lightning are going to have ice. Same thing, lightning players stay down, ice players go up, and everyone should spread out a bit. Ice players can't be too close. Once that's all done, there is another dragon attack, just like before. Out, dynamo, or cone, and then as soon as it snapshots, make sure you move away from where you were standing, as it will drop circle AoEs. And finally, we get another disaster zone, which sets the arena back to normal. We get a bit of a breather here with a mechanic called Ruinfall. It is a 2-man soak for your tanks in the center of the arena. Make sure you pop Mitt. There's also going to be a knockback coming from north, shooting you to south. There are small gaps on the south side where you can land if you ride the knockback, but I highly recommend just knockback immuning this, as there's nothing else to knockback immune in this fight. But if you choose not to, there are safe spots to land in on the south side, just like the normal mode. Once that's resolved, he will use his 3rd Skyruin, which is going to give you the elements that you did not get before. For those that skipped ahead of the lightning phase, welcome, and we are now about to talk about the blizzard phase of Skyruin. Just like before, Skyruin is going to give us a damage over time, and he's going to cast Triscourge, which is going to give us some debuffs, just like before. Ignore them for now, we'll worry about them later. The ones that we have to resolve right now are actually another light party stack, except this time we're only going to be able to use 3 people. The healer and both DPS of the light parties. Both tanks are going to get a ice debuff that is actually a big AoE tank buster. It doesn't hit too bad, but make sure you save some myths from the previous mechanic and stay very far in the northwest and northeast corners. It is worth mentioning that the stacks on the healers do not have persisting AoEs and only hit once, because the only time that happens is during the fire phase. They do hurt a bit more though, since you only have 3 people, or at least we noticed, so make sure you put a little bit of extra mitts on these 3-man stacks. An avalanche will appear from behind and carve off about half of the arena, but at a diagonal. At the same time, another of those dragon attacks we talked about will happen, whether it be a cone, chariot, or dynamo. We'll need to respect the avalanche while at the same time moving into the safe spot for this attack. And there is no pair mechanic here, and there is no baited AoEs like there was in the previous phase. Arcane Spheres will then spawn, and this happens quite a few times throughout this phase. Admittedly, this can be a little bit overwhelming at first if you're blind, but we found that there is only 2 safe spots that are relevant, and it is actually pretty chill when you do pattern recognition for this mechanic. There will be 5 of them total, spheres, and there will always be a cluster of 3, either on the western side or the eastern side. To resolve this, we always move on the opposite side of where the cluster of 3 is. So if the cluster of 3 is in like the east-southeast area, our final solution is going to be in the northwest. If they spawn in the bottom left and southwest, then the solution is going to be in the top right, northeast. We use markers for this, and we just have both god spots pre-marked, and we just call, oh, northwest, or we'll just say the marker out loud. And I reckon PF will eventually have these exact markers. Well, not ours, but PF is going to have markers for this. You just put them on the 2 safe spots, and then that's where you go. If your side has 3 Arcane Spheres on it, you're probably on the wrong side. Any lightning AoEs that appear on this phase do not have any additional size or changes, just spread out when you get those. And once the AoEs are done, Valigar will then cast Spikesicle again, just like at the start of the fight. The good news is that we can actually resolve this mostly the same way. I like to start on the side that spawns first, with full intent to move into the line AoE that comes towards us. The only catch this time is that we are going to have an avalanche mechanic at the same time. What I like to do is stay near the arrow on the hitbox of the boss, and as long as you're staying near that arrow, you'll be able to do very quick minor adjustments for any circle AoE that spawns near you. If you run too fast, you're prone to being hit by one of the line AoEs, so take your time, run along the curvature of that hitbox, and then stay around that little plus arrow on the boss's hitbox, and you'll notice that you can dodge very consistently from the circle AoEs. After some auto attacks, Valigar is then going to use another one of his dragon attacks, same as before, 3 options, except this time he will follow up very quickly with Arcane Spheres, same god spots as before. And then once the spheres are done, there will be another avalanche, just like before. There is a noticeable delay between this, so make sure you dodge the spheres and then assess where the avalanche is. There's not a rush. And then finally, he'll do another round of lightning AoEs on 4 of your teammates. Just make sure everyone's spread out. Freezing Dust is a cast bar that he does only in the Blizzard phase that does not actually do damage, but it's basically a group-wide motion. You have to be moving when this happens. It's like those little ice symbols that have been above our heads. You also want to be spread out during that too, so whenever you see that cast bar, spread out, stay moving, and it will not do damage. Once these spreads are done, Disaster Zone comes in again, clearing out the arena of all of the elements. We'll get a buster called Ice Talon here. This is just going to hit both tanks with a dot as well as a high hitting attack. Doesn't do too much, but of course still mitigate it anyway. But if this is your third element, I recommend not using too much Mitt here, because we begin the soft Enrage here, called Wrath Unfurled. Now, Wrath Unfurled does some raid-wide damage yet again to your party, but the reason why we wanted to hold those tank mitts is if the boss isn't dead yet, Valigar is going to use Mountain Fire again. And this is that tower thing from earlier, where your tanks have to kitchen sink and take turns soaking that tower. If you don't have mitts for this, your tanks might fall over. So, same as before, LOS the tower with the party, and bounce back and forth as many times as needed. And then once that resolves, if he's not dead, he'll then begin casting Tulidisaster. Tulidisaster is just going to do damage to your party, so throw the rest of your mitigation and try and bring Valigar down. I hope that this guide helped a lot. I had a lot of fun making it. Shout out to the people that helped me prog it really fast, and we got a lot of work done. Thank you guys so much again for watching. Like I said at the start of the video, we will be doing guides for every encounter in this expansion. We're going to be working on the second extreme guide here soon. And like I said, if you're doing the Savage tier coming up in a month or so, we'll have videos out for that too. So hope this helped. If you have any questions about anything, do feel free to let me know in the comments. The loot that it drops is actually weapons. So you get a high level, 710? High level 710 weapon. So good luck with your farms, and good luck on your mount drops, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Bye-bye for now.